I thought I had everything I wanted. A loving husband, a home filled with warmth, a life that felt perfect. It wasn't extraordinary, but it was mine. I had the family I always dreamed of. I never questioned it, never imagined anything could change, but that afternoon, when the house was quiet and the day seemed just like any other, everything I knew would come crashing down. I had no idea that one moment, one choice, could alter the course of my life forever. This isn't just about a betrayal. It's about desires I never thought I had, desires that overwhelmed me, pulling me into something I couldn't control. And the man who would change everything for me was someone I never saw coming. It all began so simply. We met by chance, in the most ordinary of ways. David was everything I ever wanted. He had this way of making everyone feel like they mattered, like they were the most important person in the room. His laughter was contagious, his kindness endless. It didn't take long for me to realize I was falling for him, harder than I had ever fallen for anyone before. It was pure, uncomplicated love. College days quickly turned into years, and before I knew it, we were making promises to each other. We didn't need anything grand, just each other. Our wedding was small, but it was perfect. Surrounded by our closest friends and family, we began this new chapter of our lives. It felt like everything was finally coming together. We were a team, unstoppable, happy, but what I didn't know, what neither of us could have predicted, was that sometimes, even the most beautiful moments can hide things we don't understand yet. That's when I met his family. I had always known about them, of course. David's parents were a strong, loving presence in his life. But as time passed, I grew closer to them, especially his father, Richard. I always felt like I could talk to him about anything. He wasn't just David's dad, he was more than that. He became a friend. A mentor. Someone I trusted. Completely. I could tell him things I didn't even share with David. It wasn't that I loved David any less, but Richard just made me feel understood. He made me feel like I belonged in this family, like I was a part of something much bigger than myself. I never thought twice about it. It all felt so natural, so right. There was nothing unusual in our relationship. He was always just there, a steady presence. David was my world, but Richard had a place in my heart, too. A place I never even thought to question. I had always thought of the house as a place of comfort, a refuge from the world. David and I had our moments. Sure, life wasn't always perfect, but it was ours. And on that particular afternoon, when David left for errands, I felt like I finally had a moment to breathe. I had no idea what was about to happen. I thought it would be just like any other quiet day in our home. But then, Richard walked into the kitchen. At first, there was nothing to signal that anything was wrong. We exchanged pleasantries, just like we always did. He asked how my day had been, I asked him if he needed anything. It was just the same old routine. But then, something in the air shifted. I couldn't explain it. It was as if the entire room grew heavier with an unspoken tension. The way he looked at me, his gaze lingered, not in the way it ever had before. It was like he was seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time. And in that moment, I couldn't look away. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining it. But the longer we stood there, talking, the more the space between us seemed to close. The simple act of him reaching for the sugar felt charged, as if his hand brushed just a little too close to mine. My breath caught for a second, and when I looked up, his eyes met mine, and everything I thought I knew about him suddenly felt different. There was a weight in his stare that hadn't been there before. He took a step closer. I don't know why, but I stayed still. I could feel the tension in my chest building, a sense of unease creeping in, but I couldn't bring myself to break the silence. His voice, usually warm and comforting, had dropped an octave, softer, almost like a whisper. And that's when I realized, with sudden clarity, that something had changed between us. Something I didn't know how to name then. It happened. I don't know how or why I let it happen, but he pulled me closer. His touch was firm, but not harsh. My heart raced as I felt his presence fill the space around me. I was frozen in that moment, caught between what I knew was right and the pull of something I couldn't resist. It was as if the world around us stopped, and everything else disappeared. There was no room for hesitation, no chance to pull away. I didn't want to, couldn't move. My body, my mind, everything was on hold, and just like that, the foundation of everything I thought I knew about love, about trust, about loyalty, shattered in an instant. I was terrified, but something else stirred inside me too, a confusion, a pull I couldn't explain. I didn't know what I felt anymore, and I wasn't sure I even cared. When his lips finally brushed against mine, I froze. My mind screamed at me to stop, to push him away, but my body didn't listen. It was as if every part of me had been awakened by that one touch. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, like neither of us knew where it was leading. But then it deepened, and all the warnings, all the voices telling me to stop, they faded into the distance. I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't feel anything but the way his body pressed against mine, the warmth of his hands as they touched my skin, and the guilt, it hit me all at once. A wave of shame that crashed over me the second we pulled apart. What had I done? What was I thinking? How could I betray David like this, the man I married, the one who trusted me with everything? I should have been disgusted, should have run far. Far away, but there was something else there too. Something I couldn't explain, something that terrified me because it felt too good, too powerful. A rush of something I hadn't felt in so long, desire, yearning. It consumed me. I was addicted to the way he made me feel, to the fire that had been sparked between us. Every time Richard walked into a room after that, I couldn't think straight. My heart would race, my thoughts would scatter. All I could do was feel that pull, that magnetic force drawing me to him. And I hated myself for it, but it was as if every time I saw him, the desire would get stronger. The guilt was always there, of course, lurking just beneath the surface, but it was drowned out by something more dangerous, an excitement I couldn't shake, an addiction I couldn't break. I promised myself I wouldn't go back. That I wouldn't allow it to happen again. But the truth was, I couldn't stop. And each time, it became harder to walk away. I had told myself it would be a one-time mistake, but it wasn't. And deep down, I knew it wasn't just a mistake. It was something else entirely. Something I couldn't control. And I was terrified of where it would take me. What started as one single encounter quickly became something more. I told myself it was a mistake, just one mistake, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I couldn't stop. Every 2 days, I found myself sneaking out, lying to David about where I was going, telling myself this would be the last time, that I could stop at any moment. But I never did. Each meeting with Richard, each kiss, each touch, it only made it worse. The desire I felt for him, it consumed me. It felt like I was living in a haze, where the only thing real was the need to be close to him, to feel his touch again. The more I saw him, the more I couldn't deny the pull between us. He made me feel wanted in ways that David couldn't anymore. I hated myself for it, but the feeling of being desired, of being alive in his presence, was too powerful to ignore. And when I was with David, it was like Richard's face was always there, in the back of my mind. Every time I kissed David, it wasn't his face I saw, it was Richard's. Every touch, every intimate moment, I couldn't stop thinking of him. The guilt was suffocating, but the addiction to those stolen moments was stronger. I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on my marriage, but it was like I couldn't shake the image of Richard. He was everywhere. And the more I tried to pull away, the more it felt like he was pulling me back. I was caught between two worlds, unable to escape the one I had created with him. I was in too deep, and I knew it. But every time I thought about stopping, the desire would overwhelm me. I was addicted to him, and I couldn't break free. I could feel it. David was starting to notice. He wasn't saying anything, but the quiet moments spoke louder than any words could. I'd catch him staring at me, a quiet suspicion in his eyes, and it cut me deeper than I could explain. He'd ask if I was okay, if something was bothering me. And I'd smile, but it was forced. It wasn't real. I wasn't okay. Not anymore. It was like I was living two lives, one with David, the man I promised myself to, the man I loved. And another with Richard, the man who had taken me to places I didn't know I could go. Every time David touched me, tried to kiss me, all I could think about was Richard. His face, his hands, his voice, it was everywhere, always there, even when David held me close. I couldn't escape it. I tried to push it out, to focus on my marriage, but it felt like there was a weight on my chest, like I was suffocating. David noticed. I could see it in the way he watched me, the way he asked about my day but didn't really want to know. He was waiting for me to tell him the truth, but I couldn't. I couldn't bear to break his heart, to confess what I had done. He deserved better than this, better than the woman I had become. The woman who couldn't look him in the eyes without seeing his father instead. I could feel the distance growing between us, like a slow drift into an abyss. I was becoming someone I didn't recognize, and I couldn't stop. It wasn't just the affair. It was the way I felt about myself now. I couldn't stand the person I had turned into, the liar, the cheater, the woman who was addicted to something she knew was destroying everything. I couldn't even remember what it was like to feel safe with David. I kept telling myself that I'd stop, that I'd end it with Richard, but when I was with him, it felt like I could finally breathe. When I was with him, it was like everything else faded away. But when I was with David, all I could think about was the lies. And I knew I couldn't keep pretending anymore. It was like I was living in two different worlds. And one of them was breaking apart. Every time I looked at David, I could feel him slipping through my fingers. He deserved more than what I was giving him. But the more I tried to push him away, the more I realized that I was the one pushing us to the edge of something we might never recover from. I didn't want to hurt him. But I was already hurting him. Every lie, every secret, it was slowly killing everything we had. My marriage, my family, it was all on the line, and I couldn't stop myself. That night, it all came crashing down. I looked at Richard and I saw the man who had awakened desires in me I didn't know I had. But I also saw the man who had torn my life apart. For the first time, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The affair, it had gone too far. I had lost myself. I had lost everything that mattered to me. I was on the brink of losing David, the man I promised to love, honor, and cherish. The weight of my lies was suffocating. Every moment with Richard only reminded me of how much I had jeopardized, how much I had taken from my marriage, my family, my future. But even as I stood there, facing the wreckage of everything I had built, there was still a part of me, a dangerous part, that wanted to give in. The craving, the desire, it still burned inside me. How could I stop this? How could I undo the damage I had done? I wanted to scream, to run away from it all, but the pull of the affair still held me tight, like an invisible chain I couldn't break. But then I saw David. I saw the way he looked at me, his love, his trust, and I realized just how far I had fallen. He didn't deserve this. No one deserved this. I had torn apart something pure and beautiful. The guilt was overwhelming, suffocating, but it didn't change the fact that I was too deep in. Too far gone. And now, the consequences were catching up to me. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know how to save my marriage, how to save myself. I just stood there, lost, overwhelmed by regret. And as I looked at Richard, I knew I couldn't keep living this lie. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. But I also knew that walking away from him now meant losing everything. How could I make things right? How could I ever find my way back from this? The affair is over. Richard is gone, but the damage lingers. I wish I could say that I walked away from it unscathed, that somehow I'd come out of this with a clear heart and a clear conscience. But I can't. Every day, I wake up to the same reality. I've broken something that can't be fixed. I've broken trust with David, with myself. How do you come back from something like this? Can you? David still doesn't know the full truth. He doesn't know the depth of what I did, the depth of the lies I told. Maybe he never will. Maybe that's for the best. But I can't shake the feeling that no matter how hard I try to piece things back together, it will never be the same. The cracks are too deep, and I fear we're both too damaged. I wonder if I'll ever be able to look at him the same way again, or if he'll ever look at me the same. I can't undo the past. I can't take back the things I've done. I don't know what the future holds, or if we'll make it through this, but one thing is certain, I'll carry this weight with me forever. And maybe that's the hardest part, to know that no matter how hard I try to fix it, something precious has been lost, something that can never truly be repaired. Some mistakes can never be undone. The consequences of our actions follow us, shaping us, changing us in ways we can't always control. And when desires clash with our hearts, it's a battle we never expect to fight. If you've ever found yourself torn between what you want and what's right, you know the pain of living with the aftermath. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, if it moved you in some way, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be sharing more true stories, experiences that speak to the heart, stories that might make you think twice about the choices we all make. I'd love for you to be a part of this journey, to join me in exploring the complexities of love, trust, and the human heart.